The moment that hallway light clicked on, I watched my husband's face do something I had never seen it do before in 6 years of marriage. The smirk, that slow, satisfied smirk he'd been wearing all afternoon, like a man who'd already won the game, just collapsed. Not gradually, not like someone who's surprised or confused. It fell off his face the way a mask falls when the string snaps. 1 second it was there, and the next second there was nothing underneath it but raw, naked panic. His mother, Linda, was standing right beside him in the doorway, still in her good wool coat, her purse clutched in both hands, her mouth already opening to say something sharp about the smell of dinner or the state of the entryway rug. She never got the words out, because what she saw when that light came on wasn't what either of them expected. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because to understand why that moment mattered, why I had been quietly, carefully building toward it for 3 weeks while my husband walked around our house with that smirk on his face, convinced he had me exactly where he wanted me. You have to understand what my life looked like before everything went sideways. You have to understand what I had, what I believed, and what I was willing to do to protect my daughter. My name is Ashley Marie Connors, though I'd been Ashley Marie Hartwell for the past 6 years, ever since I married Brandon in a small outdoor ceremony at his parents' lake house in Michigan. I was 28 years old. I had a communications degree from Michigan State, 5 years of solid marketing experience at a mid-sized firm in Detroit, and, at that particular moment in my life, a 7-month-old baby girl named Cora, who still smelled like something out of a dream, and had just started grabbing at my hair with her whole tiny fist. We lived in a subdivision called Maple Creek Estates in Bloomfield Township, about 25 miles north of Detroit. It was the kind of neighborhood where the HOA sent you a letter if your lawn looked a little ragged, and your neighbors waved from their driveways on Saturday mornings. 3-bedroom colonial, attached garage, a backyard with a wooden deck that Brandon had built himself the summer before Cora was born. We had a neighborhood Facebook group where people posted about lost dogs and recommended plumbers. We had a fire pit we used maybe 3 times a year. We had a KitchenAid mixer on the counter that I used every single week because baking had become my version of therapy during the pregnancy. From the outside, we looked like exactly what we were supposed to be, a young family doing well. Brandon was 32, a project manager at a commercial construction firm in Southfield. He made good money, around $94,000 a year before bonuses, and he was proud of that in the way that some men are, the way that becomes part of their identity before they even notice it happening. He wasn't mean about it, not at first. He was just certain about things, certain about how the finances should be handled, certain about what the right neighborhood was, certain about how a household should run. He liked systems. He liked being the person who understood the systems. When I got pregnant, we sat down and had what felt like a very adult, very reasonable conversation about money and maternity leave and childcare costs. I was making $67,000 at my marketing job, and we both agreed, genuinely agreed at the time, that it made more financial sense for me to take an extended leave after Cora was born, rather than immediately going back and handing most of my paycheck to a daycare. We'd revisit it when she was around a year old. That was the plan. What the plan didn't account for was what happens when you stop earning your own money and the person who is earning starts to think of that as a power arrangement rather than a partnership. It didn't happen overnight. That's the thing about these shifts. They almost never do. They happen in increments so small that each individual one is easy to explain away. Brandon had always handled most of our finances. Even before Cora, he managed the bills, the mortgage, the investments. We had a joint account, but he was the one who monitored it, who knew exactly what was coming in and going out. I had my own debit card, and I used it without thinking much about it, because there was always enough, and it was never an issue. He wasn't controlling about money back then. He was just efficient. That's how I thought about it. He liked to be efficient. After I stopped working, the joint account became the only account. My paycheck was gone. His paycheck went in, and the bills came out, and somewhere in those early months of new baby fog and sleep deprivation and the complete dismantling of my previous identity, I stopped keeping close track of the numbers. There was always enough for groceries. The mortgage was always paid. When I needed something for Cora, I bought it. When I needed something for myself, I started asking. Not formally, just mentioning things. Hey, I think I need new sneakers. Hey, Cora's running low on diapers. I was going to grab a big box at Costco. And Brandon would say, sure, go ahead. Or he'd say, let's wait until after the 15th. Or sometimes he'd say, I'll pick it up, and then not pick it up. I told myself it was normal. I told my friend Jennifer, my best friend since college, the kind of person who will say the hard thing to your face. I told her it was just the adjustment period. New baby, single income, tighter budget. It was normal. Is it normal that he has to approve every Target run? Jennifer asked me one afternoon in October, sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee going cold in front of her. Cora was asleep in the bouncy seat in the living room, and the house was quiet in that particular way it only gets during nap time, like the whole building is holding its breath. He doesn't have to approve it, I said. I just mention it so he knows what we're spending. Jennifer looked at me for a long moment. She has this look, she's done it since we were 22, where she just holds very still and lets the silence do the work. She didn't say anything. She just looked at me. It's fine, I said. We're just on a budget. You used to make $67,000 a year, she said very quietly. I know what I used to make, Jen. She picked up her coffee, looked at it, put it back down. I'm just saying, keep your eyes open, Ash. I didn't keep my eyes open. Not then. I was too tired, too deep in the fog, too in love with my daughter, and too committed to the idea that my marriage was solid, that Brandon was a good man, that we were a team. I had chosen this. I had chosen him. Admitting that something was wrong would have meant admitting that I'd made a mistake I couldn't afford, financially or emotionally, to deal with right now. So I kept my eyes closed, and Brandon kept tightening the screws, one quarter turn at a time, until the morning he did something so small and so deliberate that it finally cracked me open. It was a Tuesday in November, gray and cold, the kind of Michigan morning where the sky looks like wet concrete and the bare trees look like they're apologizing for something. Cora had been up twice in the night. I was running on maybe 4 hours of broken sleep, and I had gone to the changing table to get her ready for the day, and I reached into the cabinet underneath for a fresh diaper. The shelf was empty. I checked the other side. Empty. I went to the closet in the hallway where we kept the backup stock. I pushed past the extra towels and the vacuum bags and the box of Brandon's old baseball stuff. Nothing. Not a single diaper in the entire house. I stood there in the hallway for a second, Cora on my hip, her little legs kicking against my side. I thought, okay, I must have forgotten to reorder. That happens. I pulled out my phone to order from Amazon, clicked over to our account, went to checkout. My card was declined. I stared at the screen. Tried again. Declined. I went back to the joint account app. The balance was there, just over $4,000, like normal, but my debit card access had been restricted. I hadn't done that. I hadn't touched any settings. Someone else had. And that's when I heard Brandon's car pull out of the driveway. He was already gone for work. He had left before I was even up, before Cora was up, and he had left this house without a single diaper in it and with my card access turned off, and he hadn't said a word. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me. I thought they would. Instead, I felt something go very still and very cold inside my chest, like a door quietly closing in a room I hadn't known was open. I looked down at Cora. She was chewing on the collar of my sweatshirt, looking up at me with those dark eyes she'd gotten from my side of the family, completely unbothered, completely trusting. Okay, baby girl, I said out loud, to her or to myself or to nobody in particular. Okay. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew, with a certainty that settled into my bones like cold water, that something had just fundamentally changed. That whatever game Brandon thought he was playing, whatever he thought this moment was going to produce, he had made a serious miscalculation. He just didn't know it yet. I pulled up Jennifer's number. Then I stopped, put the phone down, picked up Cora, and held her against my chest for a long moment, feeling her warm weight, her little heartbeat, the way she smelled like baby wash and something sweeter underneath. Then I put her on the changing table, folded a clean dish towel into something workable, and started making a list. The list wasn't complicated. That was the thing. When you've been living inside a fog for 7 months and suddenly something cuts through it, something cold and deliberate and impossible to explain away, your mind gets very clear very fast. No static, no second guessing, just the clean, hard shape of what needs to happen next. I wrote it in the Notes app on my phone, sitting on the edge of the bed with Cora in my lap, the dish towel improvisation holding for now. First, diapers. Second, money. Third, information. Not in the emotional sense, in the legal sense. I needed to know exactly what we had, where it was, and whose name was on it. Because whatever Brandon thought he was doing this morning, whether it was a test or a punishment or just a casual display of power, I needed to understand the full picture before I made a single move. I called Jennifer at 8:47 a.m. She picked up on the second ring, which is one of the things I love about her. She always picks up. "He turned off my card access," I said. "No hello, no preamble. And there are no diapers in the house." A beat of silence. Then, "Where is he?" "Work. Left before I was up." "Okay." Her voice shifted into that particular register she gets when she's organizing a situation. Low, calm, practical. "Do you have cash anywhere?" I checked my wallet. $11 and some change. Not enough. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't call him yet." I wasn't going to. "Good." Another pause. "Ash, are you okay?" I looked at Cora, who had found the drawstring on my hoodie and was exploring it with enormous concentration. "I'm not scared," I said, which wasn't exactly the same thing as okay, but it was true. "I'm angry." "Good," Jennifer said again. "Stay angry. Angry is useful." She showed up in 18 minutes with a 40-count box of Pampers from Walgreens, a large coffee, and a look on her face like she had been waiting for this phone call for a while. She set the diapers on the changing table without a word, poured my coffee into a mug from my own cabinet, and sat down at the kitchen table in the same chair she always sat in. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did, and as I talked, I realized something I hadn't fully articulated to myself yet, that the diaper thing wasn't the beginning. It wasn't even close to the beginning. It was just the first move Brandon had made that was visible enough, deliberate enough, that I couldn't soften it into something benign. I told Jennifer about the card restrictions, about the way purchases over a certain amount had started requiring a conversation, about the time in September when I tried to send money to my mom for her birthday, just $50, a Venmo, and Brandon had asked me about it that evening, very casually, like he'd just noticed, like it wasn't a big deal. But he'd noticed. He always noticed. "He's been monitoring the account," Jennifer said flatly. It wasn't a question. "I think so." "For how long?" "I don't know. A while." She wrapped both hands around her own coffee mug. She'd brought one for herself, too, in a travel cup, and looked at me steadily. "Ash, you need to talk to someone. Not me. A lawyer." "I'm not filing for divorce." "I didn't say divorce. I said lawyer. You need to know what your rights are. You need to know what he can and can't legally do." She paused. "Because what he did this morning, cutting off your access to marital funds when you have a 7-month-old, that's not just a jerk move. That might be something else." I knew she was right. I also knew that the minute I called a lawyer, something would be permanently different. You can't unring that bell. But I nodded, because she was right, and because that cold thing in my chest was still there, clear and still, and it was telling me the same thing. Before Jennifer left that afternoon, I did 2 things. I took photos of every financial document I could find in the house. The mortgage statements, the investment account summaries, the insurance policies, the tax returns from the last 3 years. Brandon kept a file drawer in the office, one of those heavy fireproof ones with a lock, but he kept the key on his main keyring, and he'd forgotten that I'd had a copy made 2 years ago when he was traveling for work and I needed to get to our passports. The key still worked. I photographed everything in that drawer, sent the images to Jennifer's email, and put everything back exactly as I'd found it. Then I called Brandon. I had decided, very deliberately, to call him like nothing was wrong. I needed to understand what he thought was happening, whether this was a test, whether he was waiting for something specific, because there was a version of this where I confronted him immediately, where I said, "I found the diapers gone and my card blocked. What the hell is going on?" And that version ended with an argument that I was not prepared to win yet. I didn't have enough information, so instead I called him at 2:15 in the afternoon, when I knew he'd be between meetings, and I kept my voice light. "Hey," I said, "just checking in. Cora had a good morning. She's napping now." "Oh yeah?" He sounded normal, relaxed, a little distracted like he was looking at something on his computer. "Good. Hey, I was going to order some stuff from Amazon today. Cora's running low on diapers, but my card wasn't going through. Is something wrong with the account?" A pause. Not long, maybe 2 seconds, but I was listening for it. He said. "I'll look into it. Maybe a fraud flag or something. Just use the joint card in your wallet for now." "I don't have a physical joint card. I just have the debit." Right. I'll take care of it tonight. I'll grab diapers on the way home." He said it so smoothly, so normally, like he was a regular husband who had just noticed a banking glitch and was handling it. Like this morning had never happened. Like he hadn't deliberately, purposefully left this house without a diaper in it and with my access shut off. He was going to walk back through that door tonight with a pack of Pampers and a pizza probably, and he was going to act like everything was fine. And some part of him, the part that had been doing this for months, tightening things 1/4 turn at a time, was counting on me to let him. "Okay," I said. "Thanks." "How's she doing otherwise? Still not sleeping through?" "Getting closer," I said, and we talked for another 4 minutes about nothing, about Cora's sleep schedule and what he wanted for dinner, and I kept my voice warm and normal and gave him nothing. When I hung up, my hands were completely steady. I sat with that for a minute. The ease of the lie on his end, the fluency of it. He hadn't hesitated, hadn't stumbled, hadn't offered any real explanation. He'd just pivoted immediately to a cover story. "Fraud flag, I'll handle it," and moved on. The way you do when you've had the cover story ready. That's when I started to wonder how long he'd been ready. The next 3 days were a particular kind of strange. Brandon came home that first night with a box of Huggies and Thai takeout, and we had a completely normal dinner, and he held Cora while I cleaned up, and he was the Brandon I had married. Easy, attentive, making her laugh by blowing raspberries on her stomach. And I sat across from him at that kitchen table and smiled and responded and felt like I was watching the whole thing through plate glass. He restored my card access that night, didn't mention it, didn't explain it, just texted me, "Should be good now," around 9 p.m. I checked. It was. Balance was $4,200. I thanked him. He sent back a thumbs-up emoji. The day after, I called the number Jennifer had texted me, a family law attorney named Karen Okafor, whose office was in Southfield, about 12 minutes from our house. I told the receptionist I needed a consultation and I needed it to be confidential, which I understood was obvious with a lawyer, but I said it anyway because I needed to hear myself say it. They had a cancellation slot on Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I arranged for Jennifer to come over and watch Cora. I told Brandon I had a dentist appointment. Karen Okafor's office was on the 2nd floor of a building that also contained a nail salon and a tax preparation service. Her waiting room had 2 leather chairs, a small table with a plant that looked like it was actually thriving, and a white noise machine outside the door. She was maybe 50, with close-cropped natural hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and she shook my hand with the kind of grip that says, "I take you seriously." I told her everything. The card access, the monitoring, the way money had gradually, incrementally, become something he controlled. I showed her the photos of the documents on my phone. She didn't react with shock, or sympathy, or outrage. She just listened, asked clarifying questions, made notes. When I finished, she set down her pen. "Michigan is an equitable distribution state," she said. "That means marital assets are divided fairly, though not necessarily 50-50. The money in that joint account, the equity in the house, his 401k contributions during the marriage, those are all marital assets you have a claim to." She paused. "You stopped working by mutual agreement?" "Yes." "Do you have anything documenting that? Texts? Emails?" I thought back. Probably texts. We talked about it a lot before Cora was born. "Good. Save those. Screenshot and send them somewhere he can't access." She folded her hands on the desk. "Mrs. Hartwell, what happened last Tuesday morning? Removing your access to funds when you have a nursing infant. That's relevant. Document everything going forward. Dates, amounts, what was said. A journal. Paper or digital, but something consistent." "Is it enough to—" I stopped, reorganized the question. "What are my options, realistically?" She looked at me with those calm, assessing eyes. "That depends on what you want. If you want to stay in the marriage, we can talk about protective measures, separate accounts, formal agreements. If you want out, Michigan has no-fault divorce. You've been married 6 years, you have a minor child, you've been out of the workforce for 7 months at his request. A judge is going to take all of that into account." I drove home feeling something I hadn't expected to feel. Not relief, not dread, but a kind of clarity that was almost vertiginous. Like I'd been moving through a dark room and someone had just switched on a lamp, and I could see the walls, the furniture, the door. I still didn't know which direction I was going, but I could see the room. Brandon got home at 6:30 that evening, normal time. He kissed me on the cheek, ruffled Cora's hair, asked about the dentist, and I said fine, just a cleaning. He heated up leftovers. We watched TV. He fell asleep on the couch before 9, and I sat beside him in the lamplight, his face slack and peaceful, and I thought, you have no idea. And then, 4 days later, Jennifer called me at 11 in the morning with a voice I had never heard from her before. Flat. Careful. Like she was choosing every word before she released it. "Ash," she said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to not freak out until I've finished." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I ran into Denise this morning, Brandon's coworker. You've met her, at the company Christmas party 2 years ago." "Yeah, I remember Denise." Tall, blonde, always laughing at Brandon's jokes. "What about her?" Silence on the line. 2 seconds. 3. "Jen, what about Denise?" "She thought I knew," Jennifer said quietly. "She mentioned it like it was something I already knew about. She asked how you were handling it. The relocation." The word landed in my chest like something dropped from a height. "What relocation?" I said. It wasn't a question. My voice had gone completely flat. "Brandon put in for a transfer," Jennifer said. 8 weeks ago, to the Phoenix office. It's already approved, Ash. He told HR it was a family decision. He's scheduled to start in 6 weeks. I stood in my kitchen, Cora on my hip, the November light coming gray through the window over the sink, and I felt the room tilt slightly. 6 weeks. He had been planning this for 2 months. While we were having normal dinners and talking about her sleep schedule, and he was restoring my card access to keep me calm, he had already arranged to move us to Arizona. Without a single word, without asking, without so much as mentioning that Phoenix existed. The question wasn't whether he was going to tell me. The question was what he'd planned to do if I said no. And standing there in my kitchen, with my daughter in my arms and the gray Michigan sky pressing down outside the window, I thought I was beginning to understand the answer. That word, relocation, just sat there in the air between me and the phone. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I was standing at the kitchen sink, and I remember looking down at my own hand on the edge of the counter, the way my knuckles had gone white without me telling them to. "Ash?" Jennifer's voice, careful and quiet. "I heard you," I said. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to. Denise just said it like it was nothing, like it was common knowledge, and I had to just stand there in the Kroger parking lot and keep my face neutral while she talked about how exciting it must be, how she'd love to get out of Michigan winters. 6 weeks, I said. 6 weeks. Cora was in her bouncy seat on the kitchen floor, kicking at the little hanging toys, making those soft, cooing sounds she made when she was content. I watched her for a second. The normalcy of her, the absolute, total unawareness, was almost more than I could handle in that moment. He planned this while I was pregnant, I said. I wasn't even fully aware I was saying it out loud until it was already out. The transfer request was 8 weeks ago. Cora is 7 months old. That means he started this when she was, what, a month old? 2? I know. I was still healing, Jen. I was still getting up every 2 hours. I was still figuring out how to keep a human being alive, and he was submitting transfer paperwork. I know. Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something controlled. She was angry. She was doing what I was doing, keeping it level, keeping it functional. What do you need right now? I took a breath. I need to think. Okay, think. I'm here. I stood at the sink, and I looked at the backyard through the window. The wooden deck Brandon had built, the fire pit, the bare trees at the back of the property, all their leaves gone, standing there in the gray November light like they were just waiting for something to happen. He's been setting this up, I said slowly. The card access, the diaper thing. He wasn't just trying to control me. He was making a calculation. If I'm completely dependent on him, if I have no money, no access, no options, if he's already got the transfer locked in and a start date, then what am I supposed to do? Say no? And go where? Silence. He thought I'd just go, I said. He thought he'd present it to me as a done deal, and I'd pack up Cora and follow him to Phoenix because what else was I going to do? He thought he'd already removed all the alternatives. Yeah, Jennifer said quietly. I think that's right. I set the phone down on the counter, didn't hang up, just set it face up, and pressed both palms flat on the cold granite, and just breathed for a moment. In and out. The refrigerator hummed. Cora kicked at her toys. The gray sky sat heavy on the backyard. I picked the phone back up. I need Karen Okafor's direct number, I said. Not the office line. Her cell if you have it. I'll find it. And Jen, don't say anything to anyone. Not your husband, not your sister, nobody. Of course not. I mean it. If this gets back to him before I'm ready. Ashley. Her voice was firm and quiet. I have had your back since we were 22 years old. Not a word. I believed her. I had always believed her. That night was the hardest kind of hard. The kind where the surface is completely normal and everything underneath is falling. Brandon came home at 6:45, a little later than usual. He brought up something about a project running long. He held Cora while I finished dinner. He asked me about my day, and I told him Cora had been fussy in the afternoon, and I'd taken her on a walk to settle her down, which was true. We ate at the kitchen table like we did every night. He loaded the dishwasher. I gave Cora her bath. At one point, while I was drying her off and putting her in her sleep sack, Brandon appeared in the doorway of the nursery. He leaned against the frame and watched us, this soft look on his face that I used to find so beautiful and now made my stomach turn. She's getting so big, he said. She is. I was thinking, he said, still in that easy, casual voice. We should talk soon. About some things. The future. Where we want to be in a year or two. I looked up at him, kept my face open and curious. Oh yeah? What kind of things? He smiled. Not the smirk, the other one, the one that was supposed to look genuine. Just options, opportunities. I'll tell you more this weekend. I want to make sure I've got everything figured out first. He pushed off the doorframe. Don't want to get ahead of myself. Sure, I said. This weekend sounds good. He went to watch TV. I sat in the nursing chair with Cora at my breast, and I stared at the wall of her nursery. The soft yellow paint we'd picked together, the elephant mobile, the framed print above the crib that said, "You are loved," in pale gray letters. And I felt something shift irrevocably inside me. Not break, settle, like tectonic plates. Like something that had been slightly misaligned for a long time, finally coming into its true position with a low, final grind. He was going to tell me this weekend. He was going to present it like a plan, like something he'd done for us, for the family, and he was going to expect me to be surprised and overwhelmed and, ultimately, grateful. He'd already cleared the path. No money, no job, a 7-month-old, 6 weeks until his start date. He thought the architecture was complete. He had no idea I'd already seen the blueprints. The next 4 days were when it got dark. Not in a dramatic way. Not in the way where there's a scene, a confrontation, a thing you can point to. It got dark in the quiet way, the internal way, the way that's actually harder to survive because there's nothing to push back against. It was just me, alone in my house with my daughter, performing a marriage that I now understood had been a slow construction project, his construction project, for at least the past 7 months. Maybe longer. I started the journal Karen had recommended. Paper, not digital. A composition notebook I found in the back of the office closet, one of those black and white marbled ones. I wrote down dates, amounts, events. The November Tuesday with the diapers and the blocked card. The call where he'd said, "Fraud flag," without hesitating. The way my card access had been quietly restored. The Phoenix transfer, approved 8 weeks ago. The weekend conversation he was planning. I wrote it in plain, factual sentences, the kind that don't leave room for interpretation. But at night, after Cora was down and Brandon was asleep and the house was quiet, I would lie in bed on my side of the mattress, 6 inches from this man I had married, 6 inches from someone who was running a strategy against me, and the fear would come. Not the clean, useful anger, the fear, the kind that asks, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm making this into something it isn't? What if I blow up my daughter's family over something I've misread? That fear is a particular kind of poison because it sounds so reasonable. It sounds like caution. It sounds like the mature thing. Don't be reactive. Consider all the angles. Maybe there's an explanation. And I would lie there in the dark and let it work on me. Let it try to convince me that the card was a glitch and the transfer was going to be presented as a question, not a decree, and Brandon was still the man I'd married and everything was going to be fine. Then morning would come and I would look at his face across the breakfast table and I would see it. The slight, satisfied quality that lived around his eyes lately. The ease of a man who considers a game already won. And the fear would dissolve back into the cold, clear thing that had moved into my chest the day I found the empty shelf and the declined card. Thursday afternoon, I put Cora in her car seat and drove to Karen Okafor's office. I hadn't called ahead this time. I just showed up, Cora on my hip, and asked the receptionist if Karen had 15 minutes. She did. I told Karen about Phoenix. Karen didn't react with alarm. She picked up her pen and said, "When did you confirm this?" 4 days ago. The transfer was submitted 8 weeks ago. He's scheduled to start in 6 weeks. He hasn't told me yet. He said he's going to talk to me this weekend. He submitted a transfer for the family's relocation without discussing it with you. Yes. And you have a minor child who is 7 months old. Yes. Has he said anything about the house? Selling? Renting? Nothing. Not a word. Karen set down her pen. Ashley, I want to be direct with you. What you're describing is a pattern of financial control combined with a unilateral decision to relocate the family, without your knowledge or consent. If he proceeds with that move and you go with him, you are in Arizona. Arizona is a community property state, which changes some of the calculations. You would be further from your support system. She paused. You would be more isolated. The word landed like a stone. I'm not going, I said. Okay. No surprise in her voice. Then here's what I think you should do before this weekend's conversation. She talked. I listened. I took notes on my phone, in a password-protected app that Brandon didn't know existed. When I walked out of that office 22 minutes later, Cora asleep against my shoulder in the carrier, I had a list. Not the emotional list from that first morning, diapers, money, information. A legal list, a strategic list, the kind of list that doesn't ask permission and doesn't leave room for a smirk. The first item on it was a bank account, opened that same afternoon, solo, at a completely different institution from the one Brandon used. I transferred $400 from the joint account, a number Karen had been specific about, small enough not to trigger alarm, documented as grocery and household spending, which in any court would be completely defensible. The account was in my name only. I set up a new email address to link to it. I memorized the login. I didn't write it down anywhere. The second item was a call to my mother. My mom, Diane, lived 40 minutes away in Royal Oak. We talked maybe twice a week. Surface stuff, Cora updates, how are you doing calls. I had not told her anything about what was happening. I had not told her about Karen Okafor, or the blocked card, or the Phoenix transfer. I had been protecting Brandon's image, or protecting my own privacy, or some combination of both, in the way you do when you're not ready to make something real by saying it out loud to the person who will take it the most seriously. I called her from the parking lot of the bank. Cora was still asleep in the car seat. The engine was running for the heat. "Mom," I said when she picked up. "Hey, sweetheart, I was just thinking about you. How's my Cora girl?" "She's good. She's asleep. Mom, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen all the way through before you say anything." A pause. My mother has known me for 34 years. She heard something in my voice immediately. "Okay," she said. "I'm listening." I told her everything, all of it, from the beginning. The card access, the monitoring, the diaper morning, Karen Okafor, the Phoenix transfer, the weekend conversation that was coming. I talked for 11 minutes straight without stopping, and my mother didn't say a single word until I was done. Then she said, very quietly, "How long have you been carrying this alone?" My throat closed. I had not expected that question. I had expected anger at Brandon, or panic, or a rush of practical suggestions. Not that. "A while," I said. "Ashley Marie." Her voice was soft and absolutely steady. "You should have called me the day the card didn't work." "I know. But you're calling me now, so—" I heard her take a breath. "What do you need?" And that was the moment. Sitting in that parking lot, the heat running, my daughter asleep in the back, the gray Michigan sky pressing down on everything, that was the moment something cracked open that wasn't fear and wasn't anger and wasn't the cold strategic clarity I'd been operating on all week. It was something older and more foundational than any of those things. It was the feeling of not being alone. "I need you to be ready," I said. "This weekend, he's going to tell me about Phoenix, and I need to not be blindsided. I need to know what I'm doing when he does. Tell me what you need me to do." I looked at the clock on the dashboard. Brandon would be home in 4 hours. I had 4 hours, a new bank account, a lawyer's instructions, a composition notebook full of dates and facts, and my mother on the phone. "There's something I need to keep at your house," I said. "Documents, copies, in case." "I'll clear out a drawer," she said, without hesitation, without a single question about what that meant or why it was necessary. Just, "I'll clear out a drawer." It was Thursday. The weekend conversation was 2 days away. I still didn't know exactly how Brandon was going to frame it, what story he'd constructed, what he expected me to say. But for the first time in weeks, I wasn't dreading it. I was something closer to ready. I put the car in drive. In the back seat, Cora made a small sound in her sleep. Content, warm, completely safe, and I pulled out of the parking lot and pointed the car toward home, toward the wooden deck and the fire pit and the house where my husband was planning to tell me about Phoenix like it was good news. 2 days. I had 2 days. Saturday came in cold and white. Not snowing, just that flat, bleached Michigan sky that makes the whole world look like it's been drained of color. Brandon slept in until 9, which he almost never did. I was up at 6:30 with Cora, and I fed her and changed her and held her in the kitchen in the gray morning light, drinking my coffee standing up, watching the backyard. The deck, the fire pit, the bare trees. I had not slept well. Not because I was afraid. I'd moved past afraid, but because my mind kept running the scenario forward, testing different versions of how the conversation would go, what he'd say, what I'd say back. I'd talked to Karen Okafor on Friday afternoon. I'd driven the folder of documents to my mother's house in Royal Oak Thursday evening, after Brandon had gone to bed. I'd told him I'd forgotten something in my car and slipped out for 40 minutes while he watched ESPN. My mother had met me at the door in her bathrobe, taken the folder without a word, and hugged me in the hallway for a long time without saying anything. Sometimes, that's the most useful thing a person can do. By 10 o'clock, Brandon was showered and in the kitchen making eggs. Normal Saturday morning. He made enough for both of us without asking, which he always used to do, and set a plate in front of me with a kind of easy domestic confidence that I now understood differently than I used to. He was relaxed. He thought today was going to go a certain way. "Hey," he said, sitting down across from me. "So I wanted to talk to you about something. You got a few minutes after we eat?" "Sure," I said. "Of course." We finished breakfast. I cleared the plates. He topped off both our coffees, and we sat back down at the kitchen table, and he folded his hands on the surface and looked at me with an expression I can only describe as carefully composed, like someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say and has decided which version of their face to use while saying it. "So," he said, "you know I've been thinking a lot about our future, about opportunities. I've been doing a lot of research, and I think I found something really good for our family." "Okay," I said. "My company has an office in Phoenix. I've been in conversation with them for a while now. I wanted to make sure it was actually going to come through before I said anything, because I didn't want to get your hopes up. And it's official. They've approved a transfer. I'd be stepping up to senior project director, which is a significant bump in title and pay. We're talking about 115,000 base, plus bonus structure." He paused, watching my face. "This is a big opportunity, Ash." I held his gaze. "When would this start?" 6 weeks. 6 weeks, I repeated. "I know it's fast. But Phoenix is... The cost of living is lower, the weather is incredible. We could get so much more house for the money. And with Cora being so young, it's the perfect time to move, before she's in school, before she's got roots here." He was talking faster now, filling the silence I was deliberately giving him. "I've already looked at some neighborhoods. There's a great area called Scottsdale, really family-friendly, good schools for when she's older. I think you're going to love it." He stopped. He was looking at me with that composed expression, waiting. "You submitted this transfer request 8 weeks ago," I said. The composure flickered. Just slightly, a small tightening around his eyes. "I had to start the process early to... Cora was 6 weeks old when you submitted that paperwork." "Ashley..." "I wasn't back on my feet yet. I was still getting up every 2 hours, and you were already planning to move us to another state." I kept my voice completely even. Not cold, not angry, even. "Without asking me." "I was going to ask you. I'm asking you now. That's what this conversation is." "This isn't a question, Brandon. You said it's approved. You said 6 weeks. You already looked at neighborhoods." I picked up my coffee mug, just to have something to do with my hands, and set it back down. "This is a presentation, not a conversation." He leaned back slightly, recalibrating. "I wanted to have all the information before I brought it to you. That's just how I work. I don't like to get into half-baked discussions. I wanted to be able to give you the full picture." "The full picture," I said. "Okay. Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "The card access restriction, on the joint account, 2 weeks ago." A beat. "That was a banking issue. I told you..." "You told me it was a fraud flag, was it?" He looked at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. A reassessment happening in real time, a recalculation of how much I knew and how I knew it. "I had some concerns about some spending patterns. I was going to talk to you about it." You removed my access to our joint account while I had a 7-month-old baby and no independent income, I said. And then you went to work without telling me, and there were no diapers in the house. Silence. Was that intentional? I asked. Ashley, you're making this into, was it intentional? He pressed his lips together, looked at the table, looked back up. I needed you to understand that things were going to be changing, that we needed to be on the same page about our finances going forward. The word needed hit me somewhere very specific, not like a blow, more like a key turning in a lock. I need you to understand something, I said. I have spoken with a family law attorney. Her name is Karen Okafor. I've been documenting everything, the card restriction, the dates, the amounts, everything. I have copies of all of our financial documents, the mortgage statements, the investment accounts, the tax returns. They're not in this house. I kept my voice calm and factual, the way Karen had coached me to. I also know that in Michigan, what you did, restricting access to marital funds, is relevant in a divorce proceeding. I know that our assets are subject to equitable distribution. I know that a judge will consider the fact that I left my career by mutual agreement to care for our daughter. Brandon stared at me. His face had done something I'd never seen it do before. It had gone completely still, like a screen that's frozen. I'm not going to Phoenix, I said. He opened his mouth, closed it. I don't want to end this marriage, I said, and that was true. Even then, even in that moment, part of me meant it. But I'm not going to pretend that what's been happening in this house for the past 7 months is normal. It's not normal, and I'm not going to keep pretending. You went to a lawyer, he said. His voice had changed, thinner. Yes, without talking to me first. You removed my access to money while I was home alone with our infant, I said. I needed information. I got it. The Saturday morning stretched around us. The refrigerator hummed. From the living room, Cora made a small sound. She was in her bouncy seat, just at the edge of my sightline, kicking at her toys, completely unaware that her parents were sitting 10 feet away at a kitchen table, and the architecture of her family was being dismantled and rebuilt in real time. Brandon pushed back from the table, stood up, walked to the kitchen window, and stood there with his back to me, looking at the deck, the fire pit, the bare trees. His shoulders were tight. His hands, hanging at his sides, opened and closed once. I was trying to build something for us, he said to the window. I know you think that. He turned around. What is that supposed to mean? It means that there's a version of this where you genuinely believe you were doing the right thing, where you were efficient and strategic and certain, like you always are, and you thought that was the same thing as caring for your family. I looked at him steadily. But efficient and certain without talking to me, without treating me as an equal partner, that's just control, Brandon, even if you didn't mean it that way. He looked at me for a long time. I watched his face move through several things, anger, then something that might have been shame, then something harder and more defensive. So what do you want? He said. I want a real conversation about our finances, a joint conversation with both of us present, where I have equal access and equal information. I want my name on the accounts with real access, not access you can turn off when you decide I need a lesson. I paused. And I want couples counseling, a real commitment to it, not one session and done. And if I say no? Then I call Karen Okafor on Monday morning and we start the process. The word process sat between us like a stone on the table. Brandon looked at me for what felt like a very long time. His face was doing something complicated, the certainty draining out of it slowly, like water out of a bathtub, revealing something less composed underneath. I had never seen him at a loss before. He always had the next move ready. He always had the cover story prepared. He was the person who knew the systems. He did not know this system. I'll cancel the transfer, he said finally. His voice was flat. Okay. And we can see someone. A counselor. Okay. But I need you to understand. He stopped, tried again. I wasn't trying to trap you. I know, I said. And I did know. That was the complicated, awful truth of it. I didn't think he'd sat down one day and decided to systematically dismantle my autonomy. I thought it had grown in him slowly, the same way it had crept up on me, incrementally, in small turns, until one day it was just the shape of our lives and neither of us had noticed it becoming what it was. That didn't make it okay, but it mattered for what came next. He sat back down. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table in the white Saturday morning light, and we didn't say anything for a little while. And from the living room, Cora made a sound that was almost a laugh. She'd started doing that recently, this surprised little sound, like she'd discovered something delightful, and both of us turned toward it involuntarily. That's when the doorbell rang. I had forgotten, in the intensity of the past 20 minutes, that I had arranged this. That was the thing about having a plan. Sometimes the plan moves on its own schedule, and you have to be ready to let it. I stood up. Brandon looked at me. "Who's that?" "Your mother," I said. "You told her to come for dinner, remember? Last Sunday. You invited her." He had. That was real. He'd called Linda last weekend and invited her over for Saturday dinner. His idea, nothing to do with me. But I had added something to that plan without telling him, the same way he'd added things without telling me. I walked to the entryway and turned on the hallway light. I opened the door. Linda was standing on the front step in her good wool coat, her purse in both hands, her mouth already forming the opening of some comment about the cold or the drive. Brandon had come up behind me in the hallway, and what Linda saw, in the lit entryway of our house, was not a set table and a quiet wife and her son in comfortable command of his household. What she saw was me, standing at my own front door, with a look on my face that did not ask permission from anyone. And she saw, arranged on the entryway bench behind me, because I had put them there that morning, deliberately, so they would be the first thing visible when the door opened, a manila folder, a yellow legal pad with Karen Okafor's name and number written on the top page, and a printed copy of the Michigan Family Law Statute on marital asset access that Karen had emailed me. I hadn't planned to use them as props. I'd just left them there because I'd been reviewing them that morning. But standing in that doorway, watching Brandon's face go from recalibrating to something close to stricken, I understood that sometimes the most powerful thing isn't what you say. It's what you've already done. "Linda," I said, "come on in, dinner's at 6. She stepped inside, looking between me and her son with the sharp, reading eyes of a woman who has been navigating family dynamics for 60 years. She knew something had happened. She didn't know what. She pressed her lips together and said nothing, which was, from Linda, practically a white flag. Brandon looked at the folder on the bench. He looked at me. The smirk, that slow, satisfied smirk he'd been wearing for weeks, the face of a man who thinks the game is already over, was completely gone. What was underneath it was just a man standing in his own hallway, realizing that the architecture he'd been so certain about had already been rebuilt while he wasn't paying attention. We had a long road ahead of us, counseling, hard conversations, rebuilding trust that had been eroded one quarter turn at a time. Brandon did cancel the transfer. I confirmed it with his HR department 2 weeks later through a call I made myself, because I had learned the hard way not to take systems on faith. We opened a new joint account together at a new bank with equal access for both of us. I kept my solo account too. Karen said to. I agreed. I went back to work part-time in February, a consulting arrangement I found through a former colleague. $60 an hour, my own clients, my own contracts. By April, I was billing 20 hours a week. By June, I was negotiating a full-time offer from a firm in Birmingham. My name was back on the income column. My credit score, which I checked for the first time in over a year, was 761. We did 6 months of couples counseling with a therapist in Bloomfield Hills named Dr. Reyes, who had a calm, relentless way of naming things that both of us found uncomfortable and necessary. Brandon worked harder in those sessions than I expected him to. There was a night, maybe 2 months in, when he said something to Dr. Reyes that I hadn't expected him to be able to say, that he had confused providing with controlling, and that he hadn't understood the difference until I'd made him look at it directly. He wasn't reading from a script, I could tell. It was the kind of admission that cost something. I didn't immediately forgive him. Forgiveness isn't a light switch. But I kept paying attention, the way Jennifer had told me to back in October, sitting at my kitchen table with her coffee going cold. I kept my eyes open. And what I saw, slowly, over months, was a man trying to become something other than what he'd been defaulting to. Whether that was enough, whether it would stay enough, was something I understood I'd be watching for a long time. Cora turned 1 in April. We had a small party on the deck. My mom, Jennifer and her husband, a few neighbors. Brandon grilled. My mom cried a little when we sang, the way she always cries at things, and Cora smashed her birthday cake with both fists and looked up at all of us with those dark eyes absolutely lit up with the pure animal joy of destruction. I stood on that deck in the April sun, my daughter's face covered in frosting, Jennifer beside me with a plastic cup of sparkling wine, and I thought about the morning 6 months earlier when I'd stood in the hallway with an empty diaper shelf and a declined card and something going cold and still inside my chest. The morning I'd made a list. The morning I'd started paying attention. I had not saved my marriage that morning. I had saved myself. The marriage, whatever version of it survived, was something we were building afterward, on different terms, with different blueprints. It might hold. It might not. But it would be real, or it would be nothing. Jennifer clinked her cup against mine. "You good?" she said. I looked at Cora. I looked at the deck, the fire pit, the backyard coming green again after the long Michigan winter. "Yeah," I said, "I'm good." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it without reservation. Not as a reassurance, not as a performance of okayness, but as a simple, solid fact. I was good. I had made myself good, and no one was ever going to be able to remove my access to that.